Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
Good. We are going to get going real quick. Horace is here to help walk through the joint legislative platform. He only has about 15 minutes. We had a little bit of a scheduling mishap on our side of things, so we were fortunate to grab him this morning. And so, Horace and I worked together, and I shared with him a list of what I thought would be our issues that might make sense for the city to join us in, and he did the same with some of the city issues. So I'm just going to turn it over and have him. This is really an opportunity for you all to ask questions about the different city issues here, just because I just don't have a lot of background on these. So do you want to walk through them?
I would be happy to, and thank you for having me here. It was easy to make a detour. I just have to go to the west side after this. I'm supposed to be at the Business Association meeting on the west side. So in terms of some of the joint legislative priorities, and we enjoy our very good relationship with the GRPS staff and worked hand in hand on these draft priorities. So keep in mind that things can be added or taken out of the list. So I'll go through. The first one is local government. As you know, the governor created a special office of urban and metropolitan initiatives, and we work closely with the governor's office to encourage the state to really look at cities as economic development engines, but also engines where art, education, and all the other elements that make a community successful are important and taken into consideration. So we were encouraged by the initial draft report that came out of it, and I recall Andy Guy was part of that discussion before he moved to DGRI. But we're really looking at supporting targeted investments that leverage distinct assets in urban and metropolitan areas. And we look at cities, as you know, Grand Rapids is one of those great examples, as potential regional economic development engine. And the report that I haven't seen the finalized report, but there were 13 distinct areas that they were recommending, really looking at the urban areas through a sustainable platform prism, looking at all the different aspects: transportation, affordable housing, education, and other elements that are critical to making cities succeed. So that would be one that I think it's potential for our joint priorities, and I'm happy to answer questions. As I walk through these, you can stop me and ask questions, or should I just go through?
Just keep going.
Okay.
Jump in.
I'm happy. The transportation, obviously.
You can actually skip that one. The board's already taken a position on this. We're already fully aligned.
Okay, all right. Environment and energy. Recently, and this is perfect actually timing, I think it's also great in terms of Grand Rapids Public Schools' commitment to energy optimization, which is really in line with energy audits and energy reduction in school buildings, and aligns well with the Green Fellow program that you put in place. We were actually very happy to see GRPS actively participating in our kickoff event. Last week we had a 2030 Energy District event, and Kristen and a couple of other staff showed up, and we had a full house. So the statewide policy, as you know, Governor made his own policy goals and vision related to energy and environment known a few weeks back. There is also a counter proposal from House that Representative Nesbitt put together, and we, from the city's perspective, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I'm guessing it's the same perspective. We're very supportive of energy efficiency programs the state has in place. They were put in place in 2008 with the Renewable Portfolio Standard. We are hearing from all sorts of sides that that program may be either fully discontinued or phased out. We're hoping to see a continuation of that program. It's the same for us in terms of Renewable Portfolio Standard. We have the City of Grand Rapids has a 100% renewable energy goal, and having that statewide renewable portfolio standard really helps make basically more critical investments in renewables. So we are very, very supportive of a comprehensive statewide renewable energy policy in general that would make the state stronger and help cities and organizations like GRPS be more. I always look at energy as a bottom line, and that's really my big portfolio of the city's energy programs that we have. So that's in line with I would say it's in line with the governor's vision. Unfortunately, the statewide programs that we did see in 2008 may not be the same as we move forward. So we may need to be messaging that with legislators. We are in support of, obviously, comprehensive and fair statewide recycling plan. The governor, again, is making some commitment to increase recycling around the state. I mean, this is a no-brainer. Obviously, Grand Rapids and King County are leaders in the recycling area. So I'm happy to move to education and maybe.
No, I think these are straight from your platform. So I think let's keep with the city issues and switch over to federal here.
Well, federal, that's on page 2. We work closely through our obviously elected officials, but we have in DC our legislative affairs consultants or lobbyists. DICOMA represents us, and we've been. I would say, given the current state of issues on federal level, which can be disheartening from time to time, we still, trying to be.
Yeah, no.
I'm choosing my words carefully here. So there are a couple of issues that we would like to continue seeing and to continue working, obviously hand in hand with GRPS, but with other agencies as well. So the GR Chamber of Commerce, for example, is in support of the completion of the new international trade crossing and the U.S. Custom Plaza, which really, from our perspective, it would enhance the state's ability to compete on the global stage, especially in the very competitive environment, having that crossing and having that ability to trade better with Canada and our partners there is really economic driver for us.
I would just add to that the Grand Rapids Chamber, a number of local businesses have been very strong in their advocacy for this, kind of thinking from how do we as a school district do what we can to support those very businesses in the city that are also providing us with important taxpayer dollars for our operations. This is something that would enhance their economic activity. So there's a direct or even somewhat or indirect or somewhat direct benefit.
I was trying to find the link there. Thanks, John.
I was working for the link there. If it improves their economic activity, it improves their revenue. Therefore, we may collect more in taxes, and it supports our operations.
Very good. Well, good link. The other issue that we've been working on, and I've been working on this with Eric DeLong and other city staff, Mark the clerk, and we also have Fishback consultants. I've been working on this since 2006, since I was involved with the city's legislative affairs, working through FEMA on a proper designation of our flood wall system, working through the process for the best possible outcome for the city. Obviously, this makes really an important issue for especially downtown area. And obviously, there's a direct correlation between having a successful downtown, having our flood wall system certified properly, and having a workable community that is safe from all sorts of perspectives. So I would say that this could be one of those most critical issues, and we've been very successful lately working with FEMA in terms of getting some of our own concerns involved in that process.
I would just add that the Grand Rapids Public Museum School, part of the proposed expansion of the museum includes a watershed exhibit. The study of the watershed is part of something that we're implementing we're piloting at 6th grade in partnership with West Michigan Environmental Action Council. We've obviously several of us are members of the River Restoration Committee, so we all have a kind of a joint interest in this issue. That's, I would say, how it links to GRPS.
the next one also has the same linkage in terms of support the city and our ongoing work with the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. Basically, designation itself, we are one of very few cities around the U.S. that were designated. That helps us continue working to have vibrant urban river in the U.S. And I think that really positions the city and the GRPS to be leader in the U.S. So.
What is LAMP, Ted?
What's LAMP stand for?
It's land assessed mapping process. It's basically the new process that, and maybe I butchered the acronym, so I'll have to double check. But really, it's about new approach to mapping flood risk areas that FEMA basically selected a few case studies around the U.S. To help use better data approach, and LAMP, it really makes city be in a stronger position to work with FEMA directly, and our relationship has changed since that process was implemented.
Levy analysis and mapping
Thank you.
approach.
Okay, levy analysis.
Mapping.
LAMP.
It says levy analysis and mapping
No, that's right. That's
process or approach, right?
process. The energy funds programs such as energy efficiency, this is a long shot, and I would say energy efficiency block grant was one of those grants that was only made available once back in 2009 with ARR funding. It's a really great program that helped a lot of cities create innovative energy efficiency investments, and we are trying to find ways to support future investments in energy in cities, in local communities. I don't see, to be honest with you, this is going to be one of the federal priorities, but I think it has to be in front of the legislators. It's something that's important. I always view energy as a really great opportunity for organizations and communities to save money. Wherever we can make investments in energy efficiency upgrades, and I know that with LEED buildings that GRPS has, and our own investments we made, Grand Rapids is being recognized by DT and a couple of other organizations recently for all the energy upgrades that we made. Support the sustainable investments in communities through Community Development Block Grant, CDBG. The city is one of the entitlement communities, and we can't, every year there's a new idea to cut CDBG funds, and those are critical funds for investments in direct investments in communities, in neighborhoods, in neighborhood associations, and affordable housing. And I don't know if you want to provide linkage.
Yeah, I would just add, we even have, for example, we have several playgrounds that years ago were actually funded with CDBG funds. The neighborhood associations that we partner with are many, if not all, are funded by CDBG. There's a very direct correlation, especially as we're working to expand the neighborhood school reclamation initiatives beyond Congress and Mulek. We're looking at Palmer, we're looking at Brookside. We're going to rely more and more on those neighborhood associations, especially if they have full-time staff. That's one of the formulas as we've looked at Congress. Having an actual staffed neighborhood association is key. Mulek Park is struggling in part because you've got 4 or 5 different neighborhood associations, none of which are staffed. And it's purely volunteer, so trying to get the follow through in the organization is much more challenging.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Support the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Federal Highway Trust Fund. Obviously transportation funding and investment in transportation is very important. Direct linkage is really, you look at our BRT and our investments made in public transportation, and a lot of those are made in large part due to investments made obviously by community members, but also with federal funds and federal fund support. So,
and I would just add the Rapid, as part of our high school busing, the Rapid has a dedicated line that's all right through this Federal Highway Trust, so it's kind of a no-brainer.
My kid gets to school.
yeah. This is the next 2 points are really, maybe you can add to that, but from our perspective, Great Lakes, the health of Great Lakes is very critical, and as a community that gets water from the lakes, and it's very important for us to have that healthy lake and connection. We are obviously, and the mayor especially is involved with the efforts to look at the spread of invasive species and reduce the impact it has not only on the quality of water but tourism potentially as well. And we are in support of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, research and protection. So those two are directly linked. I can see other links there.
Our curriculum, we teach about invasive species. That's something that the watershed, again, as part of what we're looking to do is expanding our science. This just seems like a holistic policy that's good for kids, good for education, good for obviously the city and the state.
And the last federal issue that we work closely with different agencies, obviously, is stormwater is a critical piece of infrastructure in cities, and we look at ways to promote green infrastructure and different less impactful stormwater measures and mechanisms, and trying to encourage the federal regulations that come out of the process to be really conducive to more sustainable communities. So stormwater is really a critical piece that's oftentimes overlooked by communities, by state and federal legislators too.
I want to be sensitive to your time.
No, that's
I know
great.
You had
Thank
to leave,
you.
So.
Thanks so much. Items to monitor for joint action. A couple of things that we've been working on, and I know this is coming back probably, modifications to downtown development authorities. We worked closely with, at that time, Representative Cole. She was putting proposal to modify some of the TIF and DDA mechanisms in place, and we've been really engaged in terms of our approach to reporting oversight. We are very supportive, obviously, to transparency and accountability for those authorities. We did have some concerns with changes that were proposed, so we continue to be engaged. I guess that's an item to keep in our items to potentially react to, because they could have significant impact on DDAs and TIFs. Unfunded mandates and district court investments, we've been working with the state to look at potential district court investments through either statutory revenue sharing or some other processes, because the city of Grand Rapids annually has a significant contribution to district court, and as the third class court, one of that the city really puts a significant contribution funding to those courts. I know Ann Arbor does, Lansing, and some others. So we looked at all the other cities. Actually, I did research in terms of looking what the cost of maintaining those district courts are, after all, obviously, all the fees and collection of fees. But I don't know if this is something that we can be looking as a joint, but obviously having direct investments in district courts, especially in urban areas, is critical. So municipal electric rate class, and the city of Grand Rapids, we have a energy program, and every year we go through the process of either opposing some of the electric rate classes and changes that are being proposed by utilities, because we buy our electricity from consumers. So our approach was for many years to add the municipal electric rate class. As part of the 2008 law, the colleges and public schools were enabled to have their own electric rate class, and especially for cities that provide critical public health services like water, sewer, and others, it would be good to have a electric rate class that's consistent, and then it's basically predictable. So every year we see 5 to 6% increase in electric costs related to our services. So we're trying to find ways to, some of the elements that we do is energy optimization and obviously renewable energy, but the statewide changes would really help cities become, be better prepared for pricing changes and increases, especially in the electricity market. So
Is there a reason why they did, that the cities or the municipalities didn't get added back in 8 when the colleges and schools were added?
apart from maybe schools and colleges having good lobbies.
Obvious.
I'm just kidding. I think it would be hard, and you have to understand from a lot of our services pumping, and it's really heavy demand. So I think utilities were probably concerned, and I'm not speaking for them, but I think they were trying to avoid being stuck with price tag for those demand charges, because obviously when we have, in the summer, you have the large pumping that comes as a result of demand for water, for example, or during the rain event, those demand charges dictate the pricing in electricity markets. Rental clarification changes. Last year we fought hard and succeeded in preventing legislators to create very onerous requirements and also to limit cities to have their own rental certification programs. And there were a couple of bills. One in particular, there was the attempt was to limit how cities can charge for rental certification. I think we have a very good program. We used ours as a case study, and I think that overall prevailed with legislators to understand the importance of rental certification programs, the importance of keeping residents in rental units safe from public safety perspective, from public health perspective, and working with, obviously, with rental associations to make sure they understand that as well. But I think this thing will come back, so I think it's one of those issues that will not go away.
So by rental certification, we simply mean a property being certified available for rent.
Yes.
That's
Layer
it.
of governmental oversight.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we should think about? If you think of any other issues that we should be adding, I'm happy to work with John and work with you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and if you have any questions, John, you have my contact information. I'm happy to answer it individually. If you want to shoot me an email or just give me a call. And I apologize. I have to run off.
Thank you. We owe you one.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Just to continue on this topic, what we would ask, if you're comfortable, we'd like to take action either now or at your next month's meeting on adopting these and making a recommendation to the full board for approval.
Do I hear a motion?
I will make a motion.
Ross, will you
No, second.
support it? We can bring it forward to the board.
Great. Thank you. All right, you guys you may as well come up. On the budget update, in your packet is a great, you know what, that probably is. Will you? Be right back. In your packet here is a great two-pager that kind of shows side by side on the budget. We'll walk through it here. On the first page there were just the general notes. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Let's just go to the side by side. This page right here, where it has the governor, the House, and the Senate. You'll see the first line where it talks about a 3% net operational increase. That was part of the West Michigan Talent Triangle's priorities. That's something that Rusty and I worked very closely with Chris on. You'll see that none of the three proposals get that far. The closest is in the Senate, and you'll see when I conclude this, the Senate is at this point the best of the three proposals. On the 2X formula, this is another thing that we've been strongly advocating for and has been part of your position paper for a long time. The governor does not have the 2X formula, and instead they're looking at a $75 per pupil increase across the board. The House and the Senate both have 2X formula. The House version basically takes a number of categoricals, and we'll go into that in a second, and some things that were proposed in the governor's budget and just rolls it all up into the foundation allowance. Our per pupil foundation allowance would be at $7,550 under this proposal. It's currently at $7,251.
There is a mistake in there. It should be 274 instead of 234.
Okay, that's fine.
Minimum foundation.
Yep, that's
So I'll
fine.
fix that typo.
Yep. And then the Senate also has the 2X formula, and you'll see it has that hold harmless guarantee. We'd be at 7,351 under the Senate proposal. That's just our pure foundation allowance increase. On the flexibility in funds, you'll see the governor's budget increases categoricals. The House budget rolls a lot of these categoricals right into the per pupil. And the Senate, this basically it's the same as the governor's proposal, but it retains best practices. Do you have more details on that? How much does it retain all of the best practices
For the Senate?
for the Senate?
The Senate retains, yeah. as
Okay,
recommended from the
okay,
governors,
all
which
right.
Most districts shouldn't have an issue.
Right. Yeah, we certainly do not have an issue with best practices. We would be eligible for that yet again. The retirement cost, this is part of our legislative priority. You'll see the governor, his proposal is one of the strongest, if not the best we've seen when it talks about putting almost $1 billion into retirement costs. The House maintains the payment but reduces the offset payment from $100 million down to $50 million, and then the Senate follows it. So again, you can see how the Senate version is starting to really look and appear to be more in line with what your priorities are, what our priorities are.
It is interesting in the offset when it's reduced to 50 million, that then in the House budget, it then goes through the 2X formula, and we actually end up a little better with the offset taken away than if they.
No, I'm trying to like.
Yeah, it's crazy because if they just took the 50 million away and didn't put it through 2X, we would lose.
Yeah.
But because the House runs it through 2X, then it actually ends up being, I think, $15 a kid more. Something.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on the
Yeah.
number.
Larry-
Something like that. Better because it runs through that 50 million runs to the 2X.
Is the House like have a? I mean, are they responding to like the charter lobby or why is that? Okay.
Yeah.
100%. The at-risk increase, as you know, we received, or the governor proposed a $100 million increase. That's nearly 30% up from previous years, and the first time it's been an increase in well over a decade.
Almost forever.
Yeah. The House does not increase. They take all of that $100 million and roll it into per pupil. Senate maintains it, but however, they require 50% of it be spent on the third grade reading initiative, which, in all honesty, that's in many ways what we would likely be doing anyway. The only thing we don't like about that is that we really would prefer to have maximum flexibility with 31A. So in light of all the other dynamics, it's something that's important. Expanding the post-secondary opportunities, this is the advanced placement, IB, dual enrollment, something that we're very supportive of what the governor has. The House takes all of that, rolls it into per pupil, and the Senate follows the governor's recommendation. And lastly, the governor maintains the evaluation funding. House maintains it. The Senate reduces it from 14 million to 1 million. So that is actually obviously an area of concern for us. We've been very supportive of the teacher tenure reform. We've seen the benefits of the evaluation system for our administrators and for our teachers, and the fair and implementation of it is absolutely key, and it has to be done consistently throughout the district, and having the right investment there is very important. I'd say go back to the previous
Can I just say
page.
one quick thing? One of the things that's not on there is there seems to be some dispute among the House and the Senate on adult ed.
Oh, yeah.
So there's it used to be over a $300 million line. It's now a $22 million line. The House eliminates it completely. And the Senate increases it from 22 to 29 million. They could not be farther apart in terms of the differences. Yeah, the House's justification from the chair was, we've gone from 300 down to 22. We have to rethink adult ed and how that works. And so there's so he then rolls the money into the foundation allowance. Again, working through that, and then Jeff Hansen in the Senate obviously increases that to 29 million. So we're still sort of figuring out what that means for us because of those dollars and what that means in the classroom. So that's something we're gonna have to continue to keep an eye on.
They need to see that relationship with the third grade reading. Like, you cut adult ed, you're gonna undercut.
And Senator Hansen, he's, represents Newaygo County, a lot of rural counties in northern Michigan. A lot of parents of kids in schools do not have the certifications, credentials, and so his passion really is, how do we get them the certifications, credentials they need that they can provide supports for their family and their students can succeed. And so that's how he's attacking this issue.
What's the governor's position on that?
The governor kept the 22 million. It was just 22. It literally hasn't been increased in 15 years.
Yeah, so that's my other hat. I'm at the center of that.
So
I would also note the Senate, and this is another important aspect of the Senate budget proposal, is that on the early reading initiatives, the third grade reading, they double the grant from 10 million to 20 million for instructional time. Remember, there was, of the 35 million that the governor had proposed for the third grade reading initiative, 10 million of that 35 million was for increased instructional time. We know that in order to move those numbers, it's going to require more time. The Senate doubles it from 10 to 20. That's a very smart and strong investment, something that we're very encouraged by.
With the evaluation funding, initially, was that for development of the evaluation system, or was it for both development and implementation?
yes. I don't know that.
Well, I'm just wondering about the rationale for cutting, because I understood it to be development, so.
Part of the dispute between the Senate and the House, Senator Pavlov has a slightly different perspective on the issue itself. He's more of the mindset of just put complete transparency, what is your tool, put it on the website. The House version that we supported last year had more structure to it, and so Senator Pavlov isn't necessarily sold on the fact that we should be putting additional resources for this particular, because that's kind of part of the conversation that's been ongoing between the Senate and the House, the original bill sponsors, and where they're at now.
And we've been given we are reviewing Senator Pavlov's proposal for teacher evaluations. I know John and Mary Jo and I are scheduled to have a call to talk about those concerns. I will say, just because it sort of impacts everything, there is politics going on here. Senator Pavlov has announced that he's running for the congressional seat vacated by Congresswoman Miller. And he will likely be running against a colleague in the Senate for that congressional seat. So we all know how much fun that can create for policy moving forward. So I just sort of throw that out there as an overarching event that will likely impact us for the next 2 years.
And that's all we have for budget update.
I guess the bottom line here is, though some are better than others, we're now at a point where we are seeing increases, which I think is a very positive thing. We're now trying to decide which increase we like the best, as opposed to previous years where it hasn't necessarily been as good. So there seems to be some acknowledgement that we need to invest more, which is good.
Yeah, I would just
Doesn't mean it's perfect, but we're
Well,
getting.
the House, you were pointing out that the House version doesn't mean that much difference in the money with the MIPSers. It seems like that would be a really dangerous precedent to not,
Fully fund.
Yep.
State's
not to
commitment.
recognize that needs to be offset.
Our total per pupil increase, if you just roll all the dollars, not just the foundational, everything, the Senate is $144 per pupil, the House is $134 per pupil, and the governor is $117. So, again, reinforcing what Rusty just said, we're looking at an increase in all three. That does include it includes at risk. It includes all the categoricals, that per pupil dollar amount. Any other questions on budget? Shall we move on? Teacher certification test update. I don't have a whole lot to report, and I'll look a little bit to Chris and Rusty if they have more. This was a follow-up to the last conversation where you had asked, is there any movement to potentially change the teacher certification test because of there's such a great failure rate. If you recall, all but one of the colleges and universities in Michigan's had a 50% or less passage rate on that test. And I know since that article came out, and I know that there has been some rumblings in Lansing among some state lawmakers. I don't think there's been any legislation, not that I've seen yet. You know, we'll talk a bit in alternative certification. That's different, obviously. But we're going to continue to monitor this. We need to communicate with the new state superintendent once that individual comes in. I'm sure, hopefully you saw the news. We do have a new state superintendent whose name Brian Whiston. So I don't have a lot to report on number 3.
Against him.
That's why he's so good.
Maybe someday I can be state superintendent.
Has there been, with the teacher certification, has there been an analysis? I mean, I think the assumption is that it's especially been detrimental to first-generation college students and students that are coming from communities of color, and so that's particularly troubling in terms of equity issues and getting a diverse teacher pool for.
Part of the conversation has been, how do we make sure students are prepared when they leave these colleges of education to succeed in the classroom? And so a lot of this is tied to the student growth aspect. And, you know, the state has very limited ways in which they can kind of put a checkpoint in terms of the quality of the college of education program. And this is a, you know, department-led initiative for the most part, to where essentially what they did was they increased the cut score, just like they did for the need. And there are a lot of education reform groups around Lansing who certainly are supportive of that being a higher standard, a higher hurdle to which those colleges of education need to overcome. Now, with that being said, there is a transition time, just like it takes time for our students to now meet that new hurdle. It will take time for these colleges of education, hopefully, to adjust to make sure that their students are meeting that hurdle as well. So that's kind of the balance that goes with this conversation in Lansing. It is some transition, as John suggested, because of the new state superintendent. This hasn't been an issue that's been particularly legislated in the past. It's been more department-led with the State Board of Education's input. So if they do decide to go down this route, I mean, they've shown an interest to do things the department has done before through the legislature. But it's one certainly worth monitoring.
Representative Yonker has made rumblings about this, that he's looking into it. I don't know if he has any plans to do anything, but it's something he certainly has been looking at. And as I've talked with him about it, it's been sort of, we're looking at ways to help the teachers that are currently in the system now. What are we doing to make sure that the teachers coming in on a regular professional development track can succeed without having extra effort having to put in after they become teachers? And so, you know, if you look at a lot of the studies in some of the foreign countries that they love to talk about, Norway and Finland and all these other places, there's a high degree of value put on teaching, and you have only the top 5% getting actually into the education schools. And so I think they're sort of trying to balance, what do we do with the teachers in the system, and what do we do to the teachers coming into the system, when we also know that in universities, teaching is not a lost leader like nursing is. Teaching in education schools make money, and nursing schools lose money. So as everyone's trying to sort of figure all this stuff out, there's lots of balls in the air and lots of moving pieces.
Moving on to legislative updates. Third grade reading, the governor has appointed his a bicameral, bipartisan commission. It's comprised of, and I don't know which ones are senators or reps, Senator Hansen, Senator Hopgood, Senator Pavlov, Representative Price, Representative Zemke, who was here just last Friday, and Representative Kelly. It's chaired by John Kennedy. Is this Tyler?
Tyler, yep.
Tyler from the governor's office, and then Robbie Jameson from the governor's office are part of it. Yep.
Robbie's the budget person for, can I just say something real quick? I'm sorry, to go back to budget update, I want to make sure we get this. Chris has been working very hard, as we have behind the scenes. Itinerant funding was put back in, the lapse of itinerant funding was put back in the Senate bill. So Chris, thank you for your efforts.
Yeah.
It was a great job, and we've been having conversations with the administration and with Senator Hildebrand, who've been very supportive of making sure those lapsed dollars are in there. So we forgot to mention in the budget update, so I wanted to make sure that's a big piece
Yeah,
of the pie.
Yeah, and I would note that another concern with the House version is that as one of those categoricals they eliminate is the bilingual categorical that Representative Dillon and others were successful in
1.2
getting
million.
put back in. It's not much. It's 1.2 million. It's a very small amount in the grand scheme of things, but there's another concern with the House budget is it's just not recognizing some of the needs of students and why those important categoricals are there. So yes, I will send
Sorry
you
to
that
get us
list.
off track.
We have a request in, this group has just started meeting. My understanding is they're still kind of getting their sea legs, but we have a request to them to find out what their meeting schedule is and to find out when would be the most appropriate time for us to go and present.
This may be offline, I'm trying to understand the rationale to have John Kennedy chair this. Where's this coming from?
Not that I can be in their heads to figure out why they make decisions, but I know that when we actually met in the governor's office, there was some conversation about they were going to put policymakers in the room and then have a business person sort of make sure that people were on task. So
And John is also on Talent 2025 and co-chairs the Education Committee, which they have a third grade reading initiative, which Talent Triangle, GRPS, ISD have aligned with Talent 2025 on that, and so I'm guessing that's also why.
this certainly is a philosophy of the administration that, this is how we can make things happen and a way to do it in concert. So
Are they taking testimony or?
I don't know if they're having public meetings per se.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So
That's what we're trying to, my email that I just sent recently was, hey, tell us, is there meeting dates? Is there an opportunity to come? We want to kind of, when we met with them in Lansing, we made it clear that we want to be part of it, we want to be proactive. I thought the interest was there and it was expressed that they'd like us to be involved. So at some point, I think they'll reach out, but I also want to be proactive about it. So we sent an email to Tyler, may even want to send an email over to Mr. Kennedy.
Just to add to that, I think the approach is with term limits in Lansing and the policy conversation shifting based on who's new to the seat, the governor and his administration feel like if they can create these advisory commissions that can last longer than a legislative term limit, that perhaps there can be a body there, similar to what we saw with early childhood funding. That was a broad stakeholder group that led to that increase for Great Start Readiness programs. They're trying to replicate that model in other areas of third grade reading. The other thing to add is that I know the Reading Now Network has been featured in these conversations thus far, which Coit Elementary was front and center within that work, and those are some solid findings. So that's a positive development as well.
Yeah, I was just on the phone yesterday with a new point person for the national campaign for grade level reading, so I'll be very eager to be able to get in front of that body if they allow it, so.
Good. I'm going to skip to C because C leads to B in this conversation. The critical shortage legislation, we've seen some really good action on this. The House Bill 4059 passed the House 108-2, is now in the Senate Education Committee. We've had conversations with Senator Pavlov and his Chief of Staff, Brenda Resch. They are interested, but they want to tie it to alternative teaching certification. I'm going to have you chime in on that.
Yeah, no, when I talked to certainly their office, this is something that they're supportive of. They want to look at this alternative teaching certification. If someone's a welder and we need them to teach welding, then should we worry about what their English qualifications are? Those sorts of things that they'll be looking into. The legislation hasn't been introduced yet. I know that in talking with his office, they certainly understand that critical shortage is important, and they want. I felt like they do want to get it done. They just want to put this in with it and sort of run them together because in their minds, they think they're related. So we'll continue to work with them. Like I said, the legislation hasn't been introduced. Brenda's very accessible to us, always willing to sit down and talk about it. We've certainly done a lot of work to build a relationship with her and the senator as well. So we'll continue to work through that and see what we need. There also is some, I think, realization on their part that they've got a little bit of time, because even if they passed critical shortage legislation in 3 weeks and it went to the governor, we have a month left of school. So I think from their perspective, they want to take time and make sure they get the alt certification and this right. So my push to them was, don't do it in such a way where we end up in July and we don't have anything yet.
Right.
You got to do it before you leave. In June, when the budget is done. Please try to get it done before then, so that we can be ready when September starts. And that resonated with them. That's not to say that they'll get it done, but at least we're sort of moving in that direction.
Is there any specifics about what that would look like, the alternative?
Not that I've seen.
With critical shortage, though, the one thing that we've tried to bring forward, and first, Representative Holly Hughes from the Muskegon area, she deserves credit. This is an issue that didn't get the attention it deserved last legislative session, and she came to Lansing. She was actually the original sponsor of the bill that went through to allow the critical shortage list to exist. And so she, had a 2-year break from Lansing, came back. That's a nice way of saying she wasn't successful in her reelection, but she came back and she led this issue. And there hasn't been a lot of legislation that's moved from either chamber yet in Lansing, and yet she was able to get this done. So I want to give credit where it's due. The other point that we've been trying to bring up to Senator Pavlov is that there is an incredible substitute teacher shortage, and this legislation also helps address that. And we've been tying it to the fact that when we have a substitute teacher shortage, we also have interruptions within professional development opportunities. And those are things we need to be mindful of. And that's something that can be of immediate need, as opposed to, some of the teaching positions on the critical shortage list that you might be looking to fill at the beginning of the school year. So we've been working with our human resources folks. I know Grand Rapids, you guys experienced this.
Yep.
Other districts we've seen on any given day only have 50% fill rates for their substitute teachers. My wife has indicated, with her lack of substitute teachers, she's had a professional development day that was changed or canceled. And so that's kind of the perspective we're bringing to help bolster the case for the need to do this.
It's interesting, you're now starting to see billboards for companies that help place substitute teachers. The marketplace certainly is reacting.
And it's just like any business or any other entity. The economy improves, folks are going back to work. We have a shortage in a lot of areas, and teaching is one of those that certainly is there as well.
All right, the last one, the sinking fund legislation. There are actually 3 bills that were introduced. House Bill 409, which is just about expanding sinking fund to technology, from Representative Phelps. House Bill 4021, that's expanding it for buses. That's Kozowski.
Yep.
That's, and then House Bill 4388, which is technology and security expansion by McCready. The first 2 bills were referred to tax policy, and the last one is referred to education. And I don't know how freely we want to talk about why we think the tax policy references, but let's say that we know that there's interest from both the House and the Senate side and the governor's office on this particular legislation, and there is some rationale as to why that would go to tax policy instead of education. We're encouraged by the movement.
We've had very productive meetings on this front. I think people understand, there's a lot of people who kind of latch on to Proposal A. What is the intent there? And does technology fit into operational, or does it fit in the capital expenditures? And the productive conversations have been from the mindset that education's changing, the landscape's changing. And with that, we need to make sure our tax policies adapt with that. And so that's been very constructive. We had a lot of support from West Michigan legislators to co-sponsor this legislation, including the chair of the Education Committee, Representative Price. Our West Michigan contingent has been very strong on this front as well. So we've been working with leadership aggressively. We have good support from leadership in the Senate as well. It's just a matter of timing and when things begin to move, as it seems to be every legislative session.
Can we talk a little bit about Friday and then the recommendations this morning? Do we have a minute or two where we can do that?
Sure.
I just want to make sure that we talk about that, because I think it's important. to sort of mention as to why some of this stuff happens. On Friday, the coalition that was recommending changes for the Detroit Public Schools was here with a number of southeastern Michigan legislators and stakeholders. And I know that Wendy and Board Member Slade were there, and so we appreciate that. We had John and his team, from an outsider's perspective, John and his team did an unbelievable job of telling the story of what's happened at GRPS. And it was funny, sitting there as someone who's worked sort of tangentially on the outside, you sort of got, like you could feel it, and like in your heart it felt good, what they were talking about. And I know that Representative Adam Zemke, who's from the Ann Arbor area, had great things to say, and he had a photo posted on his Instagram of all the great things that were going on in Detroit, but and how great he looked. But it was I asked him if his photographer had any great pictures of me that looked like that. He said no. But the point that I want to make by bringing that up is those legislators were asked by the governor to come and look at what Grand Rapids Public Schools was doing. And they responded very quickly to come over and want to do that because they're seeing the change and that's happened here. And while there's always more work to do, it was an acknowledgement from those in Lansing that things are going well here. And I think it is something that both the board and the administration should be extremely proud of, that they were asked to do this. I don't know ultimately what recommendations might filter through that this was through, but we did get to tell our story to a new group of people and a new group of legislators, and I thought that was important. The coalition did come out with a list of recommendations yesterday, and it was
I have them right here too.
yeah, and it was essentially to remove the emergency manager and go back to the elected board, but then have a mayoral appointed commission that would look over openings and closings of schools. There's been lots of proposals sort of floated out there about the mayor's office and the state would control where kids go between charters and public schools. One of the challenges that I think the mayor is having is he's trying to rebuild neighborhoods. And so if there's public school and a charter school right across from each other in a neighborhood that's healthy, but in a neighborhood that's not as healthy, there's nothing. How do you do that? And so you certainly can see from his perspective in trying to rebuild the city why that would be important. For the school board, already sort of responded. They didn't particularly like that because an elected board doesn't want to give up control that they have. So there's a lot of challenges. When it comes to the state, the governor recommended, or not the governor, excuse me, the commission recommended that $350 million of debt be taken by the state. They sort of would assume that debt. And the governor did not reject it out of hand, said it's certainly something that we should look at. I heard it described today as like a mom when the kid wants a pony and the mom says, let's take a look at that. We'll look at that later. So I don't know what sort of that means in terms of his comments. But this will be, I think, between when the legislature comes back on the 14th and when they leave on the budget, this is going to be the topic of conversation policy-wise. And so we're certainly going to be ready to engage in that conversation because what we've seen in the past is an unwillingness to say, let's just deal with that. They want to make it statewide for every district that's failing or every schools that are failing. And so we just have to be careful and watch how that works, not making any commentary on what they've recommended, but we just have to be mindful of it. So I just wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about that. And
I had, Lynn's going to forward out the release that they sent. The long story short, they return the governance of Detroit Public Schools to an elected board, charter authorizers and charter school boards, improving transparency, focus on quality, better coordinate all the charters. State assumes the Detroit Public School debt. Create a nonpartisan coordination entity, the Detroit Education Commission that Rusty just referenced. Establish school leadership teams, and it doesn't have a lot of detail, but teams that include parents, staff, students, and others. Empower and fund the State School Reform Office and the State School Reform District. And create a shared system of data, enrollment, and neighborhood transportation. So we'll get more details as it comes.
I would be really interested in
But I'm glad you made, I think that I would just echo what Rusty said. It's good when lawmakers, when our story is circulating amongst a large number of lawmakers in Lansing, and that there's, more and more as we continue to beat that drum and be down there and sharing it, that they're saying, let's look west, let's look to Grand Rapids, and they got a good taste of how we operate on Friday, and, I think this is just the beginning. I think we're going to see more and more of these types of requests.
And I was able to share some documents from that day with Karen McPhee, who's transitioning to be the governor's education advisor, and I know she'll certainly have a willingness to want to hear the story herself from all of you, but she was very
Where's she
impressed.
from again?
She's from Ottawa.
Yeah, that's right, that's
Yeah.
right.
So
yeah.
she's been part of the formation of the West Michigan Talent Triangle. She's the Ottawa rep on there. From our perspective,
That's
her
great.
being the new governor education czar is absolutely
That's great.
great.
She was blown away by the attendance campaign, the Strive for Five, the success that you guys have had. Because a lot of times they just talk about the stick in Lansing with truancy and what we're going to do. And this really shows how the community embraces that and pushes forward and the academic success you're having as a result of that. So I know she'll be eager once she transitions at the beginning of April. So April 6th, I think, is her first day. We'll be sure to get her out here, and she'll be a frequent flyer in West Michigan.
Yep.
Another comment she made, she talked about the need, there's pockets of success all across the state with where we need to try to pull best practices from and replicate. And so she wants to do more of that as opposed to what happens in Lansing a lot of what states out there doing something.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I thought that was a very positive development as well from her perspective. And she wants to be able to, from where she sat, and she had leadership positions within the statewide organizations, the school administrators, essentially be able to say, I know where these success stories are. Let's get out there, let's see what's happening, so.
On Friday, at the table I was sitting at, I think the delegation from Detroit, one of the things they really focused on was that in our transformation plan, the major theme was how do we sustain and expand what we're doing well? And they were saying so often they just look at the negative all the time rather than looking at what's actually working. And so that was just that's connected to that. We don't have to look to grand themes nationally, what's happening. We can look at what's working within our state.
Yes, although I'm sad to see her leaving as one of my bosses.
Yeah.
I'm very encouraged by the governor's office making that selection and what she brings to the table, the conversation.
Question, I heard a soundbite, a bill introduced, sure, something about, I don't know, maybe you don't even know much about it, I don't know when it was introduced, but I just heard it this week, about decreasing evaluation for school performance or something, and increasing evaluations in regards to, maybe evaluation isn't the right word, but I just heard it on NPR.
Sure, Bill? I'm not familiar.
Okay, okay.
I'm trying to see if I can.
We'll find it before we leave.
I mean, it probably just was introduced, who knows?
Well, the good news is that here's his bills. Flip through that. NPR is doing a pretty nice story right now on teacher recruitment, teacher retention, teacher quality, the teacher test. That was one of those stories I just heard as well. So, from our perspective, and I know Sharon would agree, we're focused like a laser beam on talent, retention, recruitment, development. And, the efforts, what we're looking to do with it, as you know, when we presented at the work session, we have a very comprehensive approach we're taking to really ramp up efforts around recruitment. We had a great meeting recently with Dean Collins at GVSU and are developing a multi-tiered approach for how do we improve our relationship, how do we create a pipeline, how do we get those student teachers more focused, placed in the right buildings, make sure we know where they are. They are just getting approved for an alternative certification program themselves. That was kind of a follow-up, again, to that work session. You said explore what opportunities might be there. Is that something the district could do, or is there another way? I'm not sure we would have the capacity to do it. And according to GVSU, the loops that they jumped through was pretty, extensive. But But I think this just, we're seeing a continued, even the fact that they're moving to critical shortage, I think is an example that there's a recognition that we have to do something to, to develop and recruit the best talent.
Has GVSU found a replacement for Dean Collins? Do we know?
Not yet. The interim is Professor John Shinsky, who is a great guy. Yeah, I actually speak to his master's class once a semester, and he's got a great relationship with us. And he was in the meeting with Dean Collins when we were there. In fact, he's actually been the follow-up point person. We're dealing directly with John now. And I know part of our hope is to get in front of their faculty at one of their department meetings here in the not-so-distant future. But just lots of good movement on that.
It's, yeah, I found it. It's House Bill 4402. It was introduced the last day before they left on break, which is why I hadn't seen it yet. I hadn't looked through my stuff yet. This is the creation of the Red Tape Removal Task Force. And the goal here is to have this task force look at what are the reporting requirements that schools have and what can we do to minimize and eliminate some of those in order to free up, obviously, administrative time to actually focus on kids doing things as such. So it looks like there is sort of a hodgepodge of membership. There's somebody from the public school academies. There's somebody from Ed Trust Midwest. There's somebody that the majority leader gets, the speaker gets, all these folks. And then they have 60 days to come up with, or 6 months, 6 months to come up with recommendations. It's primarily Democratic sponsors, but interestingly enough, sort of buried in the bottom is the chair of education as a co-sponsor.
Yep.
So normally I might say there isn't a whole lot of hope for it, but just given sort of the dynamics of what's going on and Representative Shore's willingness to try to reach across the aisle to try and work, there's something there. Certainly, I think we could all probably point to something from the administrative side of the world that we wish we didn't have to do that may not impact how kids are educated in the classroom. So it seems like a reasonable.
Well, and we've started as a cabinet, each cabinet member has been asked to identify what are some of those red tape type things. If we could wave our magic wand and someone could come in and say, you don't have to worry about this reporting requirement or this regulation, what might that be? So we're already working on our own list for that, unbeknownst to this legislation.
Well, there may be some value to, once we get our list done, sort of publishing that and sending it around and not waiting for a bill to be
Yeah.
passed to start a commission.
There's some good interest in this, and part of it, you saw when the governor came into office, he has an Office of Regulatory Reinvention, to where they looked at kind of the permitting process and state interaction with the citizens. But part of the focus here is to say, all right, within our government operations, we talk about, the voice of the customer. How can we reimagine what we're doing there?
You
How
think
can
that
we align
fits right in with the Republican frameworks cutting that out?
That's right. You saw Gary Glenn was one of the sponsors too.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah. Wow. Straight.
All right.
That's all we got.
Live in interesting times.
Any further questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys. I got to scoot. I got a radio interview in 2 minutes, so.
Speak well.
That's right.
All right, thanks, guys.